What's up? I'm Nevaeh and you're watching Nevaeh's channel. And on today's episode, we are going to be talking about trauma. Yeah, the vibe's gonna be a little different today. But first, I do want to just let you guys know I did not just give up on YouTube and disappear. It has been 2 weeks since I posted a video. But really, I have been. I'm gonna have to close that because there's music playing. I have been. Okay, first week it was my birthday weekend, and then after that, I have just been regrouping after that because once you have people over, you have to clean, and I got a whole bunch of new plants and gardening, and I've been living life, girly. But I'm back. It's not a did she quit YouTube question, it's more just she had to regroup, and I knew that I wanted to film this trauma video, but I wasn't sure how because there's so much to trauma, so there might be a second and third version of this video because I definitely won't be able to cover it in a short one. And there's always going to be new things to talk about with trauma because we're still discovering the ways that it affects a person. So, yeah. Let's talk about trauma. The only thing about it is I don't want to trigger people, but to talk about trauma, you kind of have to trigger the trauma. When you talk about it, it kind of raises your awareness of it. So, trigger warning, I guess. We're going to be talking about trauma. We're not going to be talking about specific trauma, the exact events that happen, but the way that they affect us and what trauma is and all of that. One way to know if you have trauma, which I found out recently, and I was not very happy I found it out because sometimes it's triggering to know that you have trauma, was comparing trauma is a trauma response. I'm gonna say that again. Comparing trauma is a trauma response. I wish I had as much trauma as they did. I wish I had this. I wish I had that. It's a trauma response because for some reason, at some point, something or someone, whether that's yourself or others, has told you that your trauma wasn't enough and now you're internalizing it. Yeah. That was a big one. I was like, no. It's true. And I guess I should have started with the definition. I read it yesterday because I tried to film this video yesterday. It did not go well. And I understand sometimes timing is at play, but trauma is basically a distress. I will get my phone real quick, my other one, to read it off. But it's basically a distressing event. But I'm going to read it anyways. Okay, yeah. A deeply distressing or disturbing experience, emotional shock following a stressful event, or physical injury which may be associated with physical shock and sometimes leads to long-term neurosis. And then medicine, physical injury. Wow, I didn't know that. Late 17th centuries from Greek, literally, wound is the definition, which it depends on your trauma, but a lot of trauma that we don't know about, we're unaware of, is the ones that you can't see, which is mental and emotional trauma. They are two separate things, even though they affect both parts of you, because emotional trauma leads to wounded self-image and worldview, along with mental, which is mainly self-image. It can affect your worldview as well, but it's mainly self. Emotional abuse is one of those. It doesn't have to be constant either. So yeah, let's get into it. Trauma. Everyone has trauma, and I know saying that people are gonna be like, that's not true, but it is. Everyone experiences something traumatic, something deeply distressing in their life. It can be a death of a loved one. It can be anything. I don't want to get into what it can be because that's where the triggers come in. If you don't know what a trigger is and you're like, why does she keep saying that word? Triggers are something that triggers either your body or your mind to relive trauma or create a trauma response, which is created by the trauma and how your body or your mind reacts to that trauma or bringing back to that trauma. For example, you could have been in a traumatic relationship. It doesn't have to be, again, it doesn't have to be physically abusive. It could be mentally or just emotionally. And you hear a specific word and your heart starts racing and your mind starts going. You're not sure why, but it's your trauma response. So either you start attacking that person verbally, sometimes physically, or you can do the opposite. Trauma does not look the same in everyone. You can, instead of being aggressive and defensive, you can be, how do I say that correctly? Scared and retreat within yourself. Even panic attacks can happen. Trauma is a very aggressive way to show you what you went through, in a sense. And if you don't understand what trauma is and you're like, why do I keep having this? Why does this keep happening? I guess this video is kind of here to help you. The only thing about it is anxiety can kind of dress itself up as trauma sometimes. But also anxiety can be caused from trauma and PTSD and stuff like that. But again, I'm not diagnosing you, just letting you know. Just giving you some information. You do with it whatever you feel. Trauma can come at any age and it kind of leaves a lasting impression on you. You can work with your trauma and your trauma responses to experience life better, but I don't think you can fully erase trauma. I may be wrong. There may be like hypnotic, how do you say it? Or they like hypnotize you to forget? I don't know. I don't know all the, what do you call it? The procedures. I just know that we can be easier on ourselves when we're having trauma responses or we're reliving trauma, which is where the self-love comes in, where you, instead of being like, why am I so annoying right now? You could be like, what do I need to feel safe right now within myself? How can I make myself feel better? And that's what I am here to talk about today. Yes, I have rambled about trauma for the past 6 minutes, but that was to get to this point. Your trauma is valid. Whether everyone in the world has told you that it's not, because you experienced it and it affects you. Speaking about it can help for some people, but other people just need comfort and they seek that in others, which you can, as long as you have a emotionally safe group or person or people that you can talk to about it. But you can also be your own emotional support within yourself along with it. It doesn't have to just be outside. Trauma is never your fault, although it is your responsibility to heal your own trauma. And when I say responsibility, I do not mean for the good of others. I mean for yourself and your inner peace and inner standing. I heard that term once and I loved it because understanding, yes, but also inner standing. I know that sounded really cringy, but it's true. Sometimes the cringy stuff is true, even though we hate to love it. But your trauma is not your fault. Even if you put yourself in scary situations, you could not have known that was going to happen, especially if it was with someone you trusted. Not your fault. But also remember, like, don't attack that version of you. I know that some of us suffer with mental illness, so it's kind of hard to do that, but that's why I teach self-love, because no matter what kind of brain chemicals you have, or however your stuff shows up, you can still work with being nicer to yourself and being more gentle and loving with yourself, no matter what your chemistry is with yourself before. Making sure, not making sure, reminding yourself that you don't blame yourself. I know that in certain situations, in most situations, we tend to blame ourselves first. I think it's something that we're taught in society, but again, you don't want me to talk about society. We're not always the problem, and people hate to hear that. I'm not saying you're never the problem, because at some point you have to be the villain, but I'm saying that in your traumatic experiences, you're not always the problem. But not blaming and hating and being angry at that wounded version of yourself because of the trauma they experienced. Because it's not their fault. They didn't ask for it. They didn't know. And that version is still you. You're just at a different place in life, which means that you are looking at that wounded version of yourself and yelling like, it's your fault, you knew better. When you say that to yourself now, if it's something like a relationship or abuse in any way, you cannot be mad at yourself for loving that person, no matter what or how it happened at that time. You don't have to detach yourself from how innocent we all, I know the traumatized people hate that word, but how pure, I like pure instead of innocent, your understanding of the world or your understanding of them was. And you can get yourself back. I know a lot of people say that that part of them died, but we hide those versions of ourselves because we're afraid that they're going to get taken advantage of again, or that we think it's their fault. We can get that part back, and not in the same sense, like not as easily and freely as it was before, but you can work towards it. As for trauma responses, when you catch them or when you need to, you can be more aware of them. It's being more present in yourself and your understanding of self and why you're reacting the way you are. So asking yourself questions like, wait, why did my heart just race when he said this certain word, or when I heard him or her or them, or when that glass dropped, for example. These are just examples. They don't have to be your full story, but figuring out where it stems from and really just nurturing that version of yourself and telling yourself what you needed to hear, feel, see, or do in that moment. If you need to yell, you don't have to yell at that person or that version of yourself. You could just yell in general. If you need to cry, cry it out. Make sure you have a safe space for your emotions, though, where you're not judging yourself. If you need to process, because sometimes we put ourselves through trauma because we're dealing with other versions of life. Again, not fully your fault. You didn't understand that you were in control at that time, and you know better now. And that's what matters. But that part you can apologize to yourself. Not that past version apologizing to yourself now, but your now version apologizing to your past self for judging yourself. Because that's all you knew how to do. This video is very deep, and I'm trying not to like, you need to do this. But comforting, understanding, sometimes even when it's traumatic, just like the memories coming up, or just you're feeling very down because of something, but you don't know what it is, creating a comfortable space. So if you need a peaceful moment, putting on your favorite show, making some popcorn, maybe making hot chocolate, I don't know your preference, that could be like having pizza or whatever you enjoy the most, doing that. Maybe a comfortable blanket, or for some people that aren't, like, that's not their favorite vibe, going to the beach or walking outside or going, you know what I'm saying, finding your comfort place to be like, no, we're okay. And you don't have to tell yourself you're okay. It's okay to not be okay, but being like, no, we're safe. That's a better way to say that. We're safe. This is a safe place. So this is a emotionally open spot. So we can do whatever. You want to yell, you want to cry, you want to scream. Yell and scream are similar. A beautiful place that I discovered recently, which is gonna shock a few people, was a rage room. They're amazing. They blast music and they let you destroy stuff. Great experience. But having things like that, outlets, expressing your emotions without being overcome by them. You can use every emotion as fuel or power to do things you want to do, but you have to channel it correctly. Instead of like allowing your whole body to be anger, use your anger towards something. For example, working out. For me, I don't use anger to work out. It's more like sadness, if that makes sense. It's up to you. It's a very personalized experience, so every person is gonna have like just a little bit different way of interpreting this, but I hope this helped. I probably will make a lot more videos on trauma, the way it affects you and your brain and all of that later. I just wanted to get out like part one, I guess. Just let's talk about trauma is what this video is. So I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Don't worry, the videos will be coming back on time. Yeah.